What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and as you know, I have been reviewing each and every film that is nominated for Best Picture at this year's Oscars. I've already reviewed The Holdovers and American Fiction. Please go and check out those videos if you would like. Today, we are going to be reviewing the film Anatomy of a Fall, written and directed by Justine Triet. Real quick before we get into it though, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you would like to go the extra mile, consider turning on bell notifications so you get notified every time I upload new content. Also be sure to check out the Headspace Podcast, now available on all major podcast streaming platforms, particularly Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also be sure to follow me on Instagram at @TheXavierReichbaum to follow all of my professional and creative endeavors. So Anatomy of a Fall tells the story of a woman who, after her husband is found dead, is suspected to have killed him. Her and her son are then forced to endure a grueling trial and face many moral dilemmas, as her son, who is blind, was the only witness of the event. So this film was getting a lot of hype after its debut at the Cannes Film Festival, where it did win the Palme d'Or, which is basically Best Picture for the Cannes Film Festival. So that definitely played a role in my expectations for the film, as well as seeing that it was classified in most spaces on the internet as a crime thriller, which got me particularly excited as I tend to gravitate to more darker genres of film. And other than that, I didn't know anything about this movie. I didn't even know that it was a French film, which it is, but there are many scenes in both English, French, and German. So I knew the film had gotten a lot of praise overseas, and then it came to America and it was getting just as much praise here, and then of course it was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, so everything was setting my expectations pretty high for this one. But as always, we are going to start with the negatives first, because I always prefer to end on a positive note when it comes to film and filmmaking, so let's get into it. So really the only negative thing I have to say about this film is more so about my experience with it rather than a problem with the film itself. You see, I heard it described as a crime thriller, and while it is a very suspenseful film, I think to call it a crime thriller is incredibly misleading, because in reality this is a drama through and through with just a lot of very tense and suspenseful character tension and dynamics. So in that way, the film really didn't meet my expectations. It sort of subverted my expectations, and I didn't quite know how I felt about it as I was watching the film. But since that was purely expectations based, I have decided to not definitively fault the film for it, but I did think it was important to bring up, just in case you haven't seen the film and you're going into it expecting a really fast-paced, tense, suspenseful crime thriller. Maybe keep those expectations to the wayside just a little bit. The only criticism I have with the film itself is that sometimes the pacing drags a bit. And that's it. And honestly, even that just feels like me scrambling to say something negative just because I feel obligated to say something negative about this movie, since this is a movie review. But if I'm being completely 100% honest with you, as I should be, which I feel like I should be in a review, I honestly think that this film is as close to perfect as dramas get. People like to throw around the word masterpiece when it comes to movies like this. Very deep, dark, emotional character dramas with really nuanced character dynamics and everything, and I myself have done this many, many times. You know, movies that are more focused on the story and the characters rather than popular mainstream demands. And as I said, even though I myself am guilty of that, I do still feel that the term is overused. And while I would say that it's a little too soon after my first viewing of the film to label it a masterpiece, I wouldn't put it past it. I think that it is very likely that in the foreseeable future, this movie might get that label from me. This screenplay is potentially one of the greatest of all time. All of the dialogue feels so natural and authentic to the point where you really feel like a stalker, getting a peek into these characters' lives completely unbeknownst to them. It genuinely feels like one of those fly-on-the-wall films that you always hear about. I feel that this is also reflected in the technical presentation of the film, with the camera work often shifting between documentary-esque filmmaking as well as some gorgeous shots that really evoke the camera work and aesthetics of 1970s cinema. The cinematography often feels voyeuristic in nature, and I feel that this further contributes to how gripping the film is despite its very long runtime and slow burn approach to its narrative. Do you know how difficult it is to make a 2.5-hour character study this thrilling? Well, it's pretty fucking difficult, and they pulled it off here. This film has two of the most thrilling and enthralling and riveting courtroom scenes that I have ever seen. One of them clocking in at 17 minutes, and the other clocking in at a full half hour. Let that sink in. A half-hour long scene, one singular scene, a half-hour long. That's insanity. I fucking love it! Now, when it comes to the story itself, it is very deep, nuanced, and complex, and it's very emotionally challenging. Our protagonist has a lot of sides to her, and you as the viewer are sort of put in the position of the jurors on her trial, trying to determine if she is or isn't guilty. The film knows exactly what to tell us and when to tell us certain information to arouse our suspicion just enough to keep us hooked. There are so many legal dramas where we, the audience, know from the very beginning whether or not our protagonist is guilty or innocent of what he or she or they are being accused of. This film does not give us that, which is a genius subversion of a formula that we're basically completely used to at this point. Instead, this film makes the bold attempt to get us to relate to and sympathize with this character by telling us literally every other thing about her life, everything we could possibly know about her, except this one very, very important piece of the puzzle, and that piece, of course, being whether or not she killed her husband. I found this to be a refreshingly unconventional approach to this genre of film, and a very welcome one at that. Sandra Hüller, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name, I'm sure I did, but she has been nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards, and I would not be disappointed if she won. Her work in this film is perfect. I very rarely call a performance perfect. In fact, there are extremely, in my opinion, very few performances out there in film that can be considered perfect. Sandra Hüller in this movie is flawless. Some of the greatest performances of all time have tiny little flaws that you can find. I couldn't find one in this. I couldn't. It is genuinely that amazing. It may not be the comparison you would expect me to make, but I would liken it to Scarlett Johansson in Marriage Story, which is a performance that I also consider to be near flawless, if not flawless. Now, as I said, this film is not concerned with appealing to mainstream demands and the typical tropes and cliches of this genre of film. You're not going to get your typical extremely loud, emotional, melodramatic outbursts in the courtroom with our character giving a big, empowering speech as to why they should be believed and why the jury should sympathize with them. Look, those scenes have been done amazingly in other films, but that is not what this film is trying to do. It doesn't give you the privilege of that emotional release. Instead, it forces you as an audience member to sit in eerie, quiet, uncomfortable, dramatic tension for extremely extended periods of time, all of it coming to a head masterfully by the end. Without giving anything away, there is an argument scene in the film that could have become your stereotypical cliched big loud climactic argument scene in any given character drama, but it wasn't. It genuinely felt like a real-life recorded argument / discussion debate between a couple. And what I love about that is that that's how these arguments are in real life. These arguments in real life aren't extremely melodramatic with loud screaming and crying and all of that stuff. No. What makes these arguments so uncomfortable and tense in real life is the long moments of silence where you're both just looking at each other, anticipating what the person is about to say next, what the other person is about to say next, and also the dread of how this argument will affect the relationship in the future. The fact that you are even engaging in any sort of hostility with this person who you are supposed to love unconditionally, and vice versa. That's what makes these arguments so painful in real life, and I think that this movie captured that brilliantly. Speaking of silence, something else that made this film incredibly impactful for me was the complete lack of a score. If there is music in the film, it is completely diegetic, and if you don't know what diegetic sound is, it basically just means music or sound that exists within the world of the film, in the context of the film, that the characters in the film are able able to hear. It's music originating within the world of the movie, not a overlaid score. And I just found that the lack of a score made certain scenes feel so much more genuine and powerful. Sometimes a score in a film can actually assist with the emotion and elevate an actor's performance and the overall emotional impact of a scene. So I feel that the lack of a score in this film is really a testament to how incredible these actors are, because there's no score in this film helping them out when it comes to selling the emotion of the scene. They just have to be able to do it all on their own, and they do it. I also found the film extremely unpredictable, which I think is another testament to the brilliance of the script. There's many scenes in this film where you think to yourself, well, in other legal dramas that would have been predictable, and I would have seen that coming, but I didn't see that coming in this film. But since this one establishes itself as unconventional and toys with those tropes and cliches so much, when it does go typically predictable routes, it isn't predictable anymore, because it's already established itself as something completely different. It is brilliant. Brilliant writing and an excellent screenwriting strategy. I found the character dynamics deeply complex and powerful, and obviously brilliantly acted, and the ending is also quite powerful. One of the more powerful endings that I've seen in a while, for sure. It really got to me, and it left me thinking about some extremely existential things that I honestly didn't anticipate to be pondering after watching this film. So guys, in conclusion, Anatomy of a Fall is a deeply powerful, emotionally thrilling legal drama with one of the best screenplays in years. The performances are the pinnacle of acting in my mind, and I think this is a film that's going to be remembered for generations. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Be sure to let me know what you thought of Anatomy of a Fall down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Also, be sure to like and subscribe and turn on bell notifications so you get notified every time I upload new content. Thank you guys as always for watching. I will see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.